Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome to Dojo Talks. Today we are going to be recapping the 2022 FIDE candidates, which at the time of recording have officially not ended. Fabi is still trying to save this endgame against Firouzja. But more importantly, Liren did win his game over Hikaru, so we do have kind of like the important standings settled in the tournament. Nepo obviously won and is the next challenger, and in case, we'll get into it, in case Magnus doesn't play the next World Championship, Liren is going to be the challenger to Nepo. Anyway, first, let me have you guys say something about the candidates. How did you enjoy it overall, scale of 1 to 10?
I loved it. I didn't get to watch it as closely as I wanted to because I think the games were starting at 2 or 3 a.m. for me every day. So I usually missed a couple hours of it at the beginning, which is, when the round is like pregnant with possibilities. You don't yet know what opening are you going to get. Is somebody going to go on the attack? Who's got white pieces today and all that. But no, I enjoyed it, and to me, it fully lived up to my sense that it was kind of the tournament of the year, and like that it was hard to predict what was going to happen. You get so many good players in a room together. Who's going to end up losing. It lived up to all that for me, so I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I thought at least the first half was the best candidates tournament that I can remember, in terms of interesting positions, play, and it's partly motivated by, or maybe that reaction is just, I was able to watch it just about every day. I was covering it here on the ChessDojo. Sometimes Eugene Carlsen was joining me. I was just focusing on one game. It was a really enjoyable experience. And the drama and the possibilities were wide open. And now maybe I'm just forgetting candidates tournaments past, but this one really had a lot of it. And I think we'll talk about our expectations versus reality. It was just interesting in the way everybody was wrong. Everybody was wrong. And I'm still like, we'll talk also about critical moments, like could have gone different ways too. At least I feel it could have gone a couple different ways.
Yeah, I'm with you. I kind of feel like this candidates felt more dramatic just because it was covered a lot more closely on social media compared to back like 2013. Like you would have like reports of the round and stuff, but you wouldn't have this kind of like live. Like nowadays, if you go on Twitter during the round, you can pretty much figure out what's happening based on what people are tweeting, which I think is pretty cool. But that wasn't always like the case back in the day. So it feels like, yeah, every little thing that happens gets turned into like this big story. But okay, let's start with our predictions that we made. I believe it was back in April of this year when Ding was kind of the presumed challenger, as he was playing all these games in China, and we figured he was gonna qualify. And let me just get it ready for the folks here. So the podcast listeners are not going to be able to see our previous predictions, but you can look up the YouTube if you're curious. And I put them up here for the stream. And okay, so obviously there are a couple things we all got wrong. We all put Firouzja as either 1 or 2, and we all put Nepo at around 6 or 7. So I'd say we were wrong about a couple players. We were kind of wrong about Naka. I think he did much better than we expected, and Radjabov, of course, maybe the biggest difference maker. Let me actually just quickly, I can recap the current standings for folks that are not totally aware. Basically, Nepo is first, Liren second, Raja and Naka tied for third with 7.5. Caruana he's gonna be fifth, due to sixth, tied with Rapport for sixth place, and then Firouzja might end up either in last or tied based on the result of this game, or he might even leapfrog Duda and Rapport and end up in sixth place. But overall, not a great result for Firouzja, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So what was the biggest surprise for you guys here? Because there's obviously a lot of stuff that didn't go according to plan.
Well, the obvious biggest surprise was Nepo.
Nepo, yeah.
Nepo was obviously the biggest surprise. You could say that when you analyze Nepo's success, it has to be said that a lot of it is the collapse of the favorites. And that begins in round one when Nepo beats Ding. Or you could say Ding beats himself in round one. You could put it that way too if you want. And so Firouzja definitely collapsed. We're going to have to see too what happens to Firouzja, because he was the golden boy, and now is he the golden boy? Not so clear anymore. So that was also, I would say, got to say Firouzja and Nepo, those are the big stories. Firouzja's collapse and Nepo's surprising. Nobody thought it did. I don't care who says they thought it coming. Nobody saw that coming.
No, there were a couple of folks that said Nepo was going to do really well, or even said that he was one of the favorites, and they definitely called that. So full credit to them. What about you, Dave? What was the most surprising for you?
So, I mean, obviously we've listed all these big surprises compared to like what we estimated. Radjabov's finish compared to where we estimated him is one of the biggest gaps, right? And then Nepo and Firouzja, I think those three names are the furthest away. If you put like where we average put them and where they ended up, those three would be the biggest. So the one I'm going to pick is not the biggest by spacing. Okay. But it's when you look at the actual games and the actual moves, the most surprising to me is Ding Liren. And he's the one who maybe finished closest to where we predicted him of anybody, right? We have him predicted at third on average, and he finished second. That's about as close as we got on a prediction. But when you look at the games that he lost with the white pieces to Nepo and then Radjabov, those games are both just absolute shockers to me. Whereas I had no expectations for Radjabov, for example, but when you look at how he got his points, that he had low expectations for himself, he hung in there, he didn't get upset when he wasn't winning the candidates tournament. A lot of other dudes there seem to have gotten upset at the moment that they realized that they weren't going to win the candidates tournament and started, giving some stuff away. I mean, maybe you guys disagree with that analysis, but like for Radjabov to collect points because he didn't have any ambition, he didn't have any ambitions of like being world champion, for him to collect points when the other people are collapsing, when I see that, it doesn't look implausible to me, right? When I see the games that he won, I don't go like, oh my God, Radjabov, like I didn't know he had that in him. But when I look at the Ding games, this guy is so consistent in general, right? So rare to lose. And you look at these games that he just, unrecognizable in those two games with white, like so bad. The game with Radjabov, I thought when I was seeing the moves, I thought something was wrong. Like he'd lost his mind, or he was throwing the game or something.
Yeah. I mean, on that, I think on that note specifically, I feel like there's this thing that's been happening, because I do it a lot too, where like when you're really influenced by the computer, it like shows you these like weird ideas that work in certain situations. Like you remember the Firouzja Nepo game where he goes like G4, H4, and G5, and then it feels kind of suicidal if you're just looking at it for the first time. But then people were showing on Twitter, like in similar positions, G4, H4, this is like the top engine plan. So people are like speculating like, oh, he must have seen this idea somewhere and now he's like trying it here. I don't really know, but to me that's what it kind of feels like.
He said that game was following his prep for a long time, up to like one or two moves before those moves. Right?
I mean,
like
the
Queen
Firouzja
B6
game or the
Firouzja game. Queen B6 by Nepo on like move like 14 or something was the first new move to him. So that whole position with that whole pawn structure and C6 and CD5, he knew the position up to like 1 or 2 moves before he suicided with those kingside pawn moves.
And this is not a good thing, but I do it all the time. It's like you get some position, it's like, and then, you just have no idea how to play it, and you're not an engine. But yeah, it's weird to see players of this level doing that, because it's like you think they would know better or whatever. I don't know. But actually, I wanted to mention one other point you made about the players who kind of like expected to win. I feel like Giri was saying something similar on the Chess 24 commentary the other day, which by the way was very, very good. I would encourage everyone to watch it. I think it was round 13 that Giri joined for about an hour or so, and said some really, really interesting stuff. And yeah, he was saying like some of the players like Fabi, like he was obviously very close to the lead, and then like loses a couple games, like gets his heart broken, and now he can't play for the rest of the tournament. Whereas other guys, like Radjabov specifically, who doesn't have a ton of expectations, he can just kind of play his normal game, and he like doesn't really like lose terribly throughout the event, and then ends up doing quite well. So there is this kind of like roller coaster effect, or if you're going up and down, like Ding Liren also, like he was like started off badly, then had like 3 wins in a row, then like loses a game, then it's like, yeah, very, very difficult to play when you're kind of going up and down.
Yeah, and no one more suicidal than like Firouzja, right? Who's just like playing bullet all night long in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and he maybe had the most pressure on him going into the tournament. Like he has to win. If he doesn't win, Magnus doesn't even play the next match. So it's like this whole thing where, yeah, it seems like from day one, Firouzja. That's another thing Giri said that was really interesting. It's like Firouzja's entire repertoire is based on playing for a win at all costs. And yeah, sometimes it just doesn't work out. It's too risky.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, here's one. There's many narratives, but here maybe it's just because we're in the U.S. I'll just put it as a U.S. spin on it. So here's the U.S. spin of the story. So Fabi gets matched up with Naka in round 1. These guys have had beef with each other, dude, for a long time. The rivalry and Naka's attitude, like Naka might pretend he doesn't care anymore, forget about it. These guys, and Naka's always felt that he should be better than Fabi. Fabi plays a great game, round 1, knocks him out. All of a sudden, it looks like Fabi's in like perfect position. Then, because they meet each other in the same order, right? Yeah. Naka plays Fabi in round 8 and beats Fabi with white in a really interesting game.
Very nice.
Really interesting game. And I thought when it came out of the opening, I didn't. It was me and Eugene were talking about it. I felt like Fabi was fine. Yada yada. In any case. Naka wins that game, and that really decides the tournament, because at that point, then before that game, Fabi's on +3 and Nepo's on +4. Anybody's event. Then after that, Fabi's at +2 and Nepo's at +4. No one else is really even in shouting distance. So the event largely is then decided, and then Fabi just collapses, dude. Ends up finishing, it's going to be somewhere around 5th place. We don't even know yet, but in the shadows, in the bottom of the barrel, dude. And so I think it's an interesting thing how Naka and Fabi, and what was the big surprise? Definitely Naka, dude. I didn't see that coming. The betting market surprisingly saw Naka coming. They were like, oh, they had Naka at 4th place, by the way, the betting market did. And that's what happened here.
But isn't that just based on how people are betting, like those numbers?
Yeah, just how people are betting. But when you put money down, it's not just like your guess. You feel strongly about it. You're strong enough to bet on it. So that's why betting markets are a little interesting.
Yeah, but it's almost like it's like your family betting, and
well,
they're kind of betting, but they're also kind of biased.
Let me tell you something about families. They don't always bet on you, buddy. Just because you're in your family doesn't mean they're going to bet on you.
Yeah. He's got a big family. It feels like a bunch of like moms and aunts, like, and uncles, like being like, I think he's really good. I've never met somebody better than him, and they don't even play chess,
Yeah, and we'll talk about critical moments later. But I have a couple of critical moments I'll put up later when we talk about that. But I think that for Fabi and Naka, that story was big, and ultimately, it's like that collapse by Fabi lets Jan just run away with it, man.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you mentioned like +2 versus +4. So basically, Nepo, he's only a point ahead, but it already felt just like, I don't know, just psychologically, like he's just dominating the tournament. He's so solid. Like he's been in trouble a couple of times, but he saved it. He hasn't like had this he hasn't had a game where he self-destructed, where it seems like almost every other player did at some point.
I'm gonna fight that narrative, by the way. Thank you very much. But okay, go continue.
The self-destruct narrative?
Ended.
No, the thing
tournament
that
just
he was
ended,
like solid. He was not solid. He was getting popped every time. Every Petrov, he was getting popped. In any case, we'll talk about it later.
Just a small announcement for you guys. The Canada's tournament has just finished. Fabi lost, and
so Firouzja wins the final game. That's kind of nice for him. Ends in 6th place. Yeah, at least that's actually a little bit of a high note, right? Because he was in last like throughout the event, so good for him. Unfortunate for Fabi though, who finishes in 5th place.
Yeah,
behind Ding, Radjabov, and Nakamura. Well, for me, guys, I mean, the biggest surprise definitely, or the biggest thing I felt like I got wrong was Nepo, of course. I mean, yeah, it's just like, I mean, I was definitely one of the folks saying that like his previous candidate's win was illegitimate because it was basically like 2 first halves, and Nepo was always really strong in the first half of events. Yeah. So that was, it just felt like it was tailored for him. But no, this one, I mean, he absolutely won fair and square. In fact, I had to even go and like defend Nepo at some point because people were saying like, oh, he just got like lucky in a bunch of games and that was it. Which I don't know. I feel like 14 games, like that's a lot. Like either he's just the absolute luckiest player ever for this one event, or he's the previous challenger. He just played really solid and he didn't.
This tournament is
didn't
not
collapse.
About luck. I am with you. 14 rounds is not about luck. If it were a blitz quad or something. But not 14 rounds of classical chess with basically like 8 of the top 10 players in the world locked in a room together for 2 weeks. No.
One storyline I think made a lot of sense to me is Kasparov was interviewed, and he admitted, first of all, of course, he didn't pick Nepo either. But then in hindsight, he made the interesting point that it was the training for the Carlsen match which upped his game, and that training plus like the preparation, both openings and otherwise, for playing that match, which gave him the strength to have an edge in this event.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, imagine playing like 12 full games against Carlsen. Right. You're not going to be afraid of anyone after that. I mean, I think if I remember correctly,
Except Carlsen.
Except Carlsen, of course. Except Carlsen. But other than that, you're fine. I think Fabi also, after his match the following year, I feel like he had a great year where it was just like, he's maybe not outperforming Magnus, but other than that, like no one can really touch him. So yeah, I think looking back on it, it's definitely not surprising that Nepo ended up doing so well. It definitely feels like he should have been maybe in the top 3 instead of Firouzja, for example. Like him, Ding, and Caruana maybe were the 3 correct favorites. I don't know. But okay, there were some strange moments, like that game that Rapport lost to Nepo, seemingly just like right out of the opening, and Nepo basically finished his prep with the winning position on the board. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's just so many games. Like, actually, people mentioned the Firouzja game as black against Nepo, where they had this very sharp Najdorf Sicilian, and Firouzja had out-prepared Nepo, but Nepo just made some natural moves out of Firouzja's prep and then outplayed them in this kind of like thematic, open Sicilian, where Nepo just has years and years of experience. So to me, that wasn't like such a crazy game. That was just kind of that result. I don't know. It made sense to me. But yeah, it was unfortunate to see Caruana stumble in the second half, because this first half I thought was very good, right? Like he was doing fine. It's just Nepo was doing better, but then yeah, he lost this game to Naka and seems like couldn't recover after that.
Right. Now, also for Nepo's performance, I mean, I think he only won 1 game in the second half, right? Like he finished the first half at +4 with 3 draws. And then in the entire second half, pretty much he had such a lead that he could play kind of from a position of safety, from a position of like, if it's a draw, I'm okay with it. And there's more pressure on other people to try and win games. I feel like that's a perfectly fair advantage to have. That's what you're supposed to, take and take advantage of if you can get it at this level. But I feel like he used that well, and that helped him through the second half as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Speaking of, what did you guys, maybe this is a topic we can get to later, but I mean, speaking of Nepo's, I don't know, fortune, he had the fortune of playing Firouzja after that crazy bullet match where Firouzja stayed up till 5 a.m. So what did you guys think of that? Did you feel like Firouzja maybe shouldn't have done that?
No, I think kids are going to be kids, man, and they're going to do crazy stuff, and maybe it doesn't even hurt them that much, maybe it doesn't even hurt them. But the G4 H4 thing for me and Eugene, when we were talking about that, it felt like something you would do if you're playing blitz or bullet
or hyperbullet
or hyperbullet. So that's where it seemed maybe to go a little bit off the rails. Yeah. It was a very interesting game, by the way, before G4, and even G4 maybe wasn't itself a terrible move. H4 definitely was, but it was like G4 already had the inertia of H4 built into it. Where at first I thought Black was better, just it looked better. And that Queen B6 move, honestly, looks like the most natural move in the world. But then I was looking at it, I was like, maybe actually Firouzja could be better. Of course, I was never using the computer, and that was kind of a really interesting dynamic to not use the computer and everything. In any case, I thought he came out of the opening fine, and then he imploded. And of course, we got to mention, Firouzja lost twice, dude, to Nepo. That's the other storyline you just got to mention. If that goes the other way or just doesn't happen, just totally different. And of course, Firouzja thought he was going to be the champ, dude. He thought he was going to be the champ. And then that was round 4, I believe, right? Where Firouzja loses that game. Until that point, Firouzja was on an equal score, having played, 3 fighting draws before that.
Yeah, that was the game where Firouzja's path first started heading down. As far as the bullet, I think, Kostya, that he again did it the next night as well.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
And maybe after that, he just was more careful with using more anonymous accounts or something like that, where everyone wouldn't be reporting on it. But at least 2 nights in a row, he was playing bullet. And my take on it, I mean, absolutely no. I'm surprised his dad didn't slap him, because I think his dad was there. At that age, I don't know. I feel like his family was there with him, right? And you'd think they'd be like managing or helping him a little bit with that you would get slapped if you did that. And I'm also going to say, I mean, Jesse says maybe it doesn't hurt him that much, but I mean, that's like all your sleep. I know he's young, but like, it wasn't a few games. It wasn't like he lost concentration for half an hour. It was like 5 hours or something like that of your like sleep time. And I'll say this: if I had been one of the other contenders, right? Like if I had been like Ding or Nakamura or someone like that in second place, maybe 1.5 to 2 points away at that point, and the guy shows up, and he looks like tired at the board and hanging on the table, I would have been pissed. I would have been pissed that the guy is just handing Nepo a point at that moment in the tournament. I know some people, calculate that it's a foregone conclusion. I don't know how different, if it is or not. And I don't know how Ding or Nakamura felt about it, like whether they thought they were still chasing and they still had a legitimate chance. But if I try to imagine myself in their shoes, I would be so pissed for the guy to like show up and just.
There's all kinds of things though that happen like that in this tournament. I think another one that was really interesting is when the report didn't repeat against Nepo in that position and he just handed him the game in a really interesting way. And it was like, oh, and then Favi comes on the interview later. He's like, oh, that's been known for 10 years, boss. You can't do that. And then he goes, and it's just like, he's totally pissed. And then, Nepo collects another easy point. And it's like, oh man. Yeah. But that's just part of it. Like you're dealing with people and they're going to do weird things. And I get it why Report did it. I get it. He wanted to win, dude. He wanted a chance at the title.
Yeah.
And for Firouzja, I feel full sympathy. The guy's dreams have just been shattered. And all this pressure was on him. Let's go. Yeah, go play some bullet. He even lost the bullet match, by the way. It's even the worst part. He even lost the match.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like he's a kid and he's 2800, so it's it's kind of hard to really criticize him for too long given what he's accomplished. But yeah, maybe that wasn't the best decision at that point. But is it gonna derail him? Like earlier, Jesse was saying like he might not be the chosen one anymore. No way. I mean, it's just a small setback. Like, I mean, he'll have many more tournaments to prove that he can grow from this.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mean to criticize him at all, to be clear. Like I understand, like, he's a kid, there's a lot of pressure. Fine. I don't blame him. I'm just saying, like, X's and O's. The answer to that is it was a bad idea, which everybody knows. But also I'm adding this perspective that I think as like a competitor in a round robin like this, you can feel weird about different other games and how other people are doing. And I think even on Twitter, I saw like people showing screen captures of Nakamura's face when watching Nepo games, here's like Naka when he sees that Nepo's like easily winning again against somebody who's like, throwing a game to him or whatever, and you can see Naka's just like disgusted. He's like, how am I ever going to catch this guy if people are dumping like this? Right. So, I imagine that I would feel a little bit like that as one of the other contenders that I would have been upset about what Firouzja did, because it was kind of egregious, and you'd rather it happened the round that he was playing you instead of the round he's playing Nepo.
Right. Yeah, I can see how it could make a player go crazy and like trying to just play for a win outright, because they're like, wow, strange stuff is happening, so I need to like put myself in a position to win some games here. But most of these guys are pretty solid generally, so that doesn't always work when you take so much risk. Okay, well, maybe I feel like we should just keep talking about some of the more interesting moments, and then we can end talking about Magnus and some of the latest stuff that's been coming out about that.
One last thing we could say about Firouzja, because I think we're going to move on from the topic now, so it's not exactly this question, but related. The question of, is he still the golden boy? Supposedly, Magnus Carlsen said that dude is always nervous about Firouzja. At some point in the tournament, something was happening, and that was like Magnus's take on it. And when I heard that, then I said, uh-oh, maybe he's not the golden boy. Maybe Magnus sitting up above sees this flaw in this crack, and he's like, and that could be it, right? Because think about Ivanchuk. I mean, that guy had everything except he would get nervous if it was like, the candidates or something, approaching the world championship. And otherwise, he was pretty much a total package of, passion for chess, creativity, ideas, calculation ability, like, basically everything. So I don't know. Magnus has got me wondering. That's it. I mean, I really listen when the world champion speaks. So
yeah, I guess we'll see. I don't know. His talent just seems so incredibly impressive. That feels like, he'll be able to overcome it. But I don't know. He's still got time. He's 19, and 2800. So he still has, at least a few years before people will, I think, start looking at someone else as the new heir apparent. Jesse, what about you? Did you have any other moments that you wanted to mention?
Well, let's talk about moments. So there's a lot of moments. I'm going to try to limit myself to two that seem interesting. So, God, there's a lot actually. A couple that stand out of my mind is the first encounter with Nepo as white against Fabi, and Fabi plays a great game, definitely better as black. And I felt, again, I was doing this with Eugene Perlstein, like that Fabi definitely had winning chances and then settled for a draw. And that was like this critical moment where I felt it at the time. I was like, dude, you're not going to get that many chances. Now, at that point, I didn't even think Nepo was a contender. But at that point, it was like, you have to be able to win against these chumps like this when they give you the opportunity. So that was number one. And then number two was really interesting, also just from a chess perspective, because at the beginning, now one thing I did get right is I said Naka will play the role of kingmaker, i.e. he could knock some people out, and then he could also win you lose a couple games. So when Naka has white against Nepo, it's again a Petrov. People are, it's funny, they talk about Nepo being solid because he didn't lose any games, but he was busted almost every single time with the Petrov. And it's funny because like you think like, oh, with the Kasparov narrative, it's like, well, maybe it was the prep he did with the Petrov against Carlsen that made him so invulnerable. No, Fabi had him busted, Naka had him busted. We're talking like in 2022 moves, gone. And Naka plays this move, knight d2. Me and Eugene Perlstein were just like, obviously knight d4, that's what you're doing. You're not even thinking about it. Plays knight d2. I've looked at that move like over and over. I still don't even know what Naka was thinking. There was something he was thinking.
No, but he explained to Jesse. Actually, it was in his recaps, which actually have been really interesting. I watched a few of them. He was just trying to repeat the position and get the position after knight d4 anyway. So he thought he's repeating with knight d2, knight b3, and then he's just going to play knight d4, and then he's closer to the time control. So that was his explanation.
So it was even weirder than that though, because in addition to queen a1, black had queen c2. So it's just like, knock it, buddy. What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? Weird blackout. But yeah, no, you were right on your evaluation. Like, yeah, knight d4 there, and he's doing really well.
So those are my two moments. I could go on, but I really felt like at that point, if Naka wins the game, I mean, tournament's wide open still, wide open at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I felt, by the way, that whereas you think about this American story of Fabi and Naka, Fabi's had multiple huge games in his life, but that was by all means Naka's biggest game of his life. That was like the chance for that kid to have a shot at the title, man. It was so close for him.
Yeah, but then his game against Fabi, which you mentioned earlier, for me, that was, easily one of the best games of the tournament. Just just so interesting throughout and very well played. And also super important for the standings, at least for second place. But also, he was the one that kind of slowed down Fabi quite a bit to keep him from catching Nepo. And I gotta say, credit to Magnus. I don't think this was an intention, but he made the tournament very interesting by making the fight for second very relevant throughout the event. Which I don't think that was his point, but that is kind of what ended up happening. I feel like that also contributed. Just this tournament, I just felt like there was a ton of pressure on everyone going in. Not just the folks we mentioned, but even guys like Rappert and Duda. I mean, obviously they're also trying to win games and win the candidates. I mean, they're young and, seems like they came there to win. But, and then, the whole chess world is watching. There aren't other events like a Dortmund or something going on to distract. It's everyone is just watching the games every single day. And hopefully they're staying off of social media. But if some of them are going on and just seeing some of the stuff that's been happening, I mean, that would just drive a player crazy if they weren't able to block it out. So I feel like that's kind of been a factor in terms of just kind of building on the pressure.
Yeah.
So David, any top moments for you that we haven't discussed?
I think my favorite moment of the whole thing was going on Jesse's broadcast and talking with him about the Duda Caruana game. That was the most fun moment of the entire candidates for me, and the moment that I learned the most from. I mean, there's all kinds of games I looked at, and sometimes, you've got your reaction and you're reading other people's reactions, you're reading news articles or seeing tweets or whatever. But just sitting there stewing in the position with Jesse and Jason Stone King, that was the best experience of the candidates for me, so that was my best moment. And, I've never understood any double king pawn positions like ever, other than the King's Gambit, which those positions are useless because they're theoretically bad for white. So what can you do? I mean, it only helps me when I play e5 and somebody's dumb enough to play the King's Gambit against me. Otherwise, there's basically nothing in all the double king pawns I understand. And that game there, working on that with Jesse. And, for a moment I thought like, I learned something. like I understand something about something in this position. So that was the best moment for me, for the candidates. And as far as like decisive moments that like decided what happened with the candidates, I think it's the two ding games that I mentioned before. It's interesting. Jesse kind of sees the tournament largely through the lens of Fabi, because to Jesse, Fabi's probably kind of like a massive favorite. So what's the path there? And of course, then also, you're looking at his game, so you're focused on his story. To me, the two games that Ding lost with white, just egregious. And if you change the results on those games, he would be tied for first or in first place, depending how you score those games. So as far as like what decided the tournament, to me, it's those two games that Ding loses with white, just absolutely abysmally, from a player who rarely plays a bad move, much less a bad game.
Yeah, and doesn't often lose with white, of course. Right, he had that streak, right, 100 games without a loss not that long ago, which was pretty impressive. But I mean, he did end in second, winning a big game against Nakamura today, kind of just like on demand, it seems. So maybe we could talk about that for a little bit, because Magnus has been going not so much back and forth, but being really like kind of wishy-washy about the World Championship, saying that he might not play again after Nepo, then saying like he's not going to play unless the next challenger is Firouzja. Now the latest news that we've been hearing is that he's in negotiations with FIDE, specifically Dvorkovich, and discussing about potential changes to the format for his presumed match against Nepo, because Nepo has been he's already clinched it for a couple of days already. So yeah, first of all, like, wow, like what is your guys' reaction to this? Like that Magnus is like negotiating the format.
So first of all, I think it's not correct to say negotiating, because from what I understand, he's been in contact with, like, he was able to present his views on what the format should be, but it wasn't in the negotiation. I would say negotiation only if he was saying, if you guys need to do this or else, but he's not doing that. He's just put forward his ideas. It might come to that, especially if he says, I won't play unless. But at the moment, so at the moment it's not negotiations, but it was very interesting how it happened basically right at the end of the tournament, that FIDE announced that they had been talking to Carlsen about it's like they had delayed announcing it until the end of the tournament about maybe a new format.
Wouldn't you say, Jesse, that the fact that he's suggested he probably won't play means that that's implied or implicit in any discussion of what
it's in the background, of course, like they can't ignore it.
If it's not the format he likes, like probably he's not playing. I mean,
and he has backed out of a cycle before when he was like a top candidate. When it was the candidates matches in Kazan, he dropped out, saying like he doesn't like the format. It's like not fair to the challengers, and that I think was a big blow to FIDE, because they didn't have like the next superstar in the candidates tournament.
To I think it's really interesting. I don't think anybody really knows what Magnus's game is here. Most people, especially people at the top, like Fabi and others, don't believe that he won't play. They don't believe it. I would like to believe that if he doesn't play the chess, other people have different opinions. I think it would be the worst thing if he doesn't play. I think it would really hurt his brand. And then it's not just him because he's the head of this big company with the Play Magnus group. So it would be a massive mistake. But by doing it this way, he certainly embroils the waters here. No one knows what's going on, man. No one knows.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. I feel like it's odd because, on the principle of the matter, it's like you don't just want the world champion to be able to decide the format, however they please. That doesn't seem right on the surface. On the other hand, Magnus is number one. He's been number one for 10 years. He's a clear number one. He's usually ahead of the next guy by 40, 50, 60 points. There was a couple moments when Fabi got close to him on the rating chart, but basically Magnus has just been an undisputed number one for 10 years now. And if he doesn't play the World Championship, then it loses a lot of value. And so unless he just if he just retires from chess, then fine, he's out of chess, he's no longer the world champion, and we need a new world champion. But if he's actively playing tournaments and maintaining his number one status, and then he just gives up the title, then FIDE has a big problem. And for me, it's just it's just kind of a tough situation. It's all right, we're gonna have another FIDE world champion, and in this case, it would be Nepo versus Ding or something. But for me, it would just be well, Magnus is still number one. This is just kind of it's just one of those murky periods that we're going to remember in the future, when Kasparov was the kind of classical world champion, and then we had these FIDE world champions that were winning the yearly events. But I'm with you guys. It feels like he is going to play. I mean, that's what it feels like, even though he said he's not really interested, and people close to him have said he's not interested.
Yeah. I think,
and I just want to say, from the perspective of history, and I think we mentioned this last time, but Kasparov didn't want to play Shirov, handpicks Kramnik to play the match against in violation of every moral legal code. Then, out of this hubris to play Kramnik, gets popped. He gets popped, and that's the end. That's the end. It's not quite the end. He plays a couple more years, but that's basically over, right? So it's an interesting way in which Kasparov at that time also was I think felt like it was, for him, I think it was less of, definitely maybe, because Kasparov would always kill Shirov, dude, just murdering that guy. And so it didn't feel like a match, and he didn't feel like there would be sponsorship and yada, yada. We're going to have a similar problem with this thing. Does Magnus care about the money? Probably not so much, but the hype of this Nepo Carlsen match, honestly, the only way to hype it is if Carlsen maybe doesn't play it, man. Because I think Carlsen was such a huge favorite last time. He's going to be a massive favorite this time. What kind of sponsors are really going to be pumped? I don't know. And then if it's Nepo versus Ding, oh no, that's not an exciting match. I don't want to see that. I really don't.
Well, I would definitely watch that match. I think that would be cool. But yeah, it would just be a bummer to not have Magnus involved in what they call the world championship. But so the other speculation that's been going on is that the changes that Magnus wants to the world championship is to include some other time controls, because people have been dropping all kinds of hints. Magnus has been saying he wants the format to represent who is a more all-around player, meaning better suited and faster time controls, and things like that. Just basically implying that he wants rapid chess to be involved. There was one article posted that said the format that Magnus likes is just doing all rapid, just 4 rapid games a day, similar to what they do in like the Champions chess store, where you have to win like several matches
That sort of shows his
in a row.
vision.
Which that form would actually just exclude classical chess all around, which seems a little extreme and probably unlikely. But yeah, if it comes down to Magnus and Nepo playing some kind of match that's like a hybrid of classical and rapid, and maybe even blitz, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, if it were truly just rapid, I mean, far be it from me to try and criticize or change anything that Magnus says, but I guess this is just speculation and hearsay. And so I'll say, if it's just to create a series of rapid games, why not be talking to FIDE about changing the format of the World Rapid Championships instead of the World Classical Chess Championship?
Well, because he's tired of having to prepare 6 months for 12 hard-fought classical games with like tons of prep and theory and
right. So don't play. I think that's like a great option. But I mean, you don't need to. There's already a rapid championship. I mean, and that's of interest and of value to him, and he likes to play that event. So why doesn't he talk to FIDE about the format for their rapid championship?
I guess the other side of it, it's like if we're talking about who is a more complete player, and you include blitz, rapid, and classical is like the three forms of chess. And if you looked at it that way, then it would be like, yeah, that's, you just do all three formats. So it's not just any one or the other.
Right. When my design of the world, chess that's in my head, there is the classical championship, a rapid championship, a blitz championship, and also an event which I currently have imagined in my head as the decathlon. And that is a mix of a whole bunch of different events and shows somebody who has, the skills in both solving endgame studies and playing rapid chess and playing classical chess, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there is a great place for that in chess, but I do think there is a place for a classical world championship, which in my opinion, the classical world championship should be entirely decided by classical chess and the blitz championship by blitz chess. And to me, it's super obvious. I don't see the argument against it.
Yeah, that's fair. It would be a bummer to then just not have a classical world championship. You have the overall world championship, which is like some mix of everything. And then you have a separate blitz world championship, separate rapid world championship, and then no separate, like only classical.
Why not just add your other event that you have an idea for? The classical world championship is cool too. And if it's not for Carlsen anymore, and I think, he had fun the first one or two matches against Anand for sure, right? But if it's no longer of interest to him, he can just leave, and that's totally fine.
Well, maybe that's what will happen. Maybe he'll let Nepo and Ding fight for the classical world championship, and then he'll set up his own whatever overall world championship.
And everyone can know that they're only the second best player in the world that year or whatever, and that's fine too. It'll still be an epic match and cool. I mean, Wesley So's made comments that like when they go to tournaments, it's really just a question of who's going to get second place. And it feels kind of pathetic that after years and years that hasn't changed, and that when they go to a tournament, they're just trying to get second place, but that's how it is. So that's how it is.
Yeah. But then, why have a world championship at all? Like, we know Magnus is number one. Just let them keep playing chess. As soon as there's a new number one, maybe they can play a match against Magnus. Personally, I don't see why Magnus has to be forced to play a match against someone who's like so far below him. I feel like there should be a clear challenger.
You talked about how much influence the world champion should have versus FIDE for determining these things. And there was a phase where the champion had full say in the matter, right? And in those cases, the rule that a lot of world champions used was you have to be able to raise X amount of money and then I'll play you. That was the entire qualification process, right? Was you would try to get famous enough on the tournament circuit that you could convince a sponsor to put up $1,000, and then Lask or a Capablanca might play you. And now you could have a similar system where you're like, you have to get within 50 rating points of Magnus, and then he'll give you a match. It could be based on like rating points instead of money.
Honestly, I think that's like not unreasonable. Like, you have to be like a worthy, not that Nepo's not like a worthy challenger, but it's just like, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Magnus, he's demonstrated he's just clearly above everyone. So, yeah, to me, I don't know. I feel like he has some moral right to at least dictate what the top of chess. It's kind of like he's not like an elected official, but chess is all about who's the strongest player in the world. And he's definitely the strongest. So he kind of has some say in how the chess world should be run. And that's just how I feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
Magnus, but I got a message for you right here. You're not going to last forever at the top. Go as long as you can, and we're going to judge your career at the end of it, buddy. That's the way it works. You bow out now, that's it. You're not, there's some other kid's going to come along, and you might think you're the greatest of all time. Somebody else is coming, buddy. So I don't know what his name is. He's coming. Maybe it's even a her. And then you're going to get knocked off, buddy. So this is your chance. You have to suffer a couple more years, and then it's over, boss. Okay? It's over. That's my message to you.